If they shot them 20 minutes before, 50 missiles would have hit 50 targets. The entire time when the Iron Dome was down, which was several hours, Hamas shot 2 missiles. One that landed in empty land, one that landed in an empty building. 15 minutes later, they shot 50 missiles, and the Iron Dome was in place. In Chicago, there's an organization called Chicago Mitzvah Campaign. In honor of the war, that they will sponsor 50% of tefillin, and that person gets the name of a soldier. And as he's putting the tefillin, he's supposed to have in mind that this should also, obviously it's for him, but it should also protect this soldier. And he receives the soldier's parents' phone number. The soldiers don't have their phones, but he calls the parents to say, I want you to know I am putting on tefillin to protect your son. And it's very, very appreciated by the soldiers and by their parents, even if they're not religious, but they all get it.
Somebody's thinking about
it. Yeah, they all realize it's protection, and it's very, very, very meaningful, very impactful. And I'm sure if you know someone who's not in Chicago, I'm sure Chicago Mitzvah Campaign would mail them out. So
no,
I'm
my
sure
husband already has, we bought the field.
Right, I remember the story, of course. I know that story very well when you went to the Rebbe.
Right, he's putting it now, these days, he's putting every day.
Amazing. But if there's someone you know, if there's someone knows who maybe until now was a little distant from the commandment, but wants to do something to express his Judaism, or the world expresses hatred of us, the more we kick back. We say, what? You hate us because we're Jews? All right, we better be more Jewish. So there's a lot of people feeling that we're going to be more Jewish. And for many people, for many men, more Jewish means, let me explore this idea of tefillin. We have people really wanting to express their Judaism. If you don't like us because we're Jewish, we really want to express that we're Jewish.
Adavki, we do it.
So that's I think there's that element that people really want to express their Judaism. Like, you really hate me because I'm Jewish? Like, that's so weird. What is this Jewish that you hate me about? Let me find out about my relationship with God that you so are scared of, that so bothers you. I definitely think that's a very strong movement that we see all over the world today. Unfortunately, there's a lot of negative energy, but I really feel that negative energy is really making a lot of Jews care that they're Jewish and relate to their being Jewish and do things because they're Jewish. Like, it's important. I always thought it was unimportant. Well, the world really thinks it's important. So, let me find out. Let me explore. Along these same lines about, like, if they don't like us because we're Jewish, we really want to explore being Jewish, or just in general, that that Jews are in trouble because they're Jewish. That Jews died because they're Jewish. Jews were tortured because they're Jewish. It really makes you think about yourself as a Jew. I heard this beautiful incident that I think spread, so maybe some of you have also heard it. A rabbi of Passaic, who is in New Jersey, and he said that he was in the march in Washington, and he was looking around, and he was so touched by seeing so many Jews that didn't look so Jewish, but were clearly Jewish and were clearly there, and it was very, very moving for him. And a young guy who didn't look too Jewish started talking to him. He was covered in tattoos. And where are you from? He said the name of a city. It's about 9 hours away from New York. How'd you get here? Oh, well, we hired a bus. And then when the bus driver found out where we were going, he said he's not driving Jews to a Jewish rally. And she's talking about being freed. She said, like, she didn't until they actually came into Israeli hands. She still didn't believe it. And she said, thank God, Todallah. She said Hashem's name. Thank God that we were free. And the interviewer said to her, I don't know if the interviewer was religious or not. You couldn't really tell, but the interviewer said to her, like, wow, someone with such a background like you is saying thank God. Not in a negative way, but sort of like, wow, I'm surprised you're saying thank God. And she said, you know what? There had to be someone watching us. Like, whatever she was educated, whatever she was taught to believe, whatever distance officially she was from her roots, with everything she went through, she knows there was a God watching her. She knows that's the only way she made it back. And that's a very universal feeling. People are really waking up. People are really doing things. I'm sure every single person here heard about the congressional hearing with the 3 presidents from Harvard and Penn and MIT. I watched the clip many, many times, as I'm sure many of us have. And it's just an amazing wake-up call for the Jewish people. It's just an amazing, amazing force for us to see what people are saying publicly. And Jews from all over, Jews that never really thought about their Judaism are responding. There's a social media personality, David Portnoy, big businessman. He came out right away and said, unless all three of those deans are fired, he is not hiring one graduate, not from Harvard, not from MIT, not from Penn. If this is the education they're receiving, he does not want them in his company. Now, obviously, everyone responds in their own way. But I think the point is that when we hear such insanity, like genocide contextually might be a problem, maybe, depends on the context. It really, really, really makes us be like, okay, wow. So what am I doing to respond to this? And I keep thinking, I know God is the orchestrator of this insanity. And the only way I process it, which is the way I process it, is to wake us up, and it's working. It really is waking us up. And like I said with Menucha's son-in-law, yeah, if they hate us this much, let's find out why. Let's embrace it. My son this year, he said he had his largest, my son in Springfield, he said he had his largest public menorah lighting ever. He had a number of public menorah lightings, that it was biggest crowds he ever had in all of his years. I wasn't at all surprised. He had a major event they never had until now, that the governor participated in a lighting of the menorah before in front of the governor mansion, and very prominent event. And again, I feel it's all coming from the same energy, and this is the appropriate response. If this is what the world's saying, we got to embrace it more. We've got to find out what we are, who we are, that this is what the world, I wouldn't say all the world, some of the world is saying and thinking and feeling. And it's really beautiful to see it. And I see it in many, many, many people. And that's why I highly encourage people to, once I get that flyer, share with people this fill-in concept, because you never know who might say, yes, I want to do this. I keep feeling also, I keep sharing that there must be so many miracles happening now, more than what we know. And of course we know, and if you're into it, every day more miracles come out. Every day I read about more miracles. I watch videos that are sharing more miracles. I hear audios of people sharing miracles. I think we're not hearing everything, of course, because some are classified, just like by the Gulf War. Some we didn't yet hear. Everyone else heard it, but we missed it. Some people had personal miracles and they're not sharing. And obviously some people themselves don't realize the miracle. My cousin lives in Jerusalem, and two of her sons are in the army. One was in Gaza, one is in the northern border, and her son from Gaza just came home after 6 weeks, I believe, in Gaza. And he said to his mother, he said every single day he experienced miracles. He said, you don't understand what that terrain is like. You don't understand. We don't get it. I mean, it's such a tragedy, every life that's lost. And I don't know where they're holding the count now, over 80 soldiers since they invaded Gaza. The Israeli army, when they plotted out this war, when they were planning for this war after October 7th, their expectation was 12 soldiers a day. That's what they thought. Every day. Another 12 soldiers are going to die. That's just what's going to happen, and we have no choice. We've been there for weeks. Saturday was 10 weeks since October 7th. We've been in Gaza for about 7 weeks now. 80 soldiers is 80 husbands, 80 fathers, 80 sons. But if we think that they were thinking 12 a day, this is what my cousin said. I spoke to her Saturday night, and she said this is what her son said. He said every day he saw miracles. It's the only way he and his group survive. And my cousin said she really feels that everything everyone's doing, I was telling her I was praying every day for her son. I was giving charity every day for her son. And she said she feels like there's this zone, this barricade, this protection. It's created by everything we're doing. And that protection is what's protecting the soldiers. A friend of mine, her mother is a therapist in Israel, and a lot of the therapists in Israel are volunteering their time to help people that are suffering trauma since October 7th. A friend of mine who's a therapist in America does the same thing. You could be an American and also do it. It's not a problem. It's probably for most people, it's not in person anyway. Anyway, so this woman, she said every soul, she's doing soldiers. So this my friend's mother, she's a therapist in Israel, and she's volunteering helping soldiers. And they're all very traumatized soldiers. That's why they're talking to her. And she said every single one of them is a miracle. And she's writing down the miracles. So she doesn't have permission to share the miracles now, but she's writing them down because there'll be a time when she can share the miracles. Every one of them is a miracle. I saw this from a Chabad soldier. He's a reservist, but a commander in the reserves. And when October 7th happened, he was sent to be a commander in a certain area very close to Gaza, like on the border there. It was 2 weeks after October 7th. It was a Friday, 2 weeks later. And he said in his office, it was probably a tent, the red phone rang. He said as a commander, they have a red phone. Red phone means intense emergencies. The red phone never rings. And if it rings, you panic. And he picked up the red phone. He knew he was going to hear something bad because that's the only reason the red phone will be ringing. They weren't ringing to say good news. And he was told by someone who sounded under a lot of strain, the Iron Dome collapsed. Just to understand what this means, Hamas, every day, Hamas, speaks of the poor Palestinians that have no fuel. Let's translate that. That means we have to steal all the aid coming in. And the thing we want to steal the most is fuel because we need those fuels to send out our missiles to Israel. Because every day, even though there's no fuel in Gaza, they manage to have the fuel to send many, many, many missiles. Most of the missiles get intercepted by this protective system called the Iron Dome that was put in place when we gave Gaza to the Arabs. That was part of the deal. That America gave us this technology of the Iron Dome to protect us, because even then they understood what probably was going to happen. And the Iron Dome intercepts most of the missiles. Not all. Some missiles get through. But most of the missiles are intercepted, and actually very often the missiles turn around and land in Gaza, but it doesn't bother Hamas much because they're underground. The Iron Dome was down. That meant any missile that Hamas would send would hit its target. And don't tell your soldiers. This was the message he got. The Iron Dome is down. You cannot tell your soldiers, but without telling them, make sure they protect themselves. And he's like, what does he do? What does he tell his soldiers? When you see a missile, bury your head in the sand? He didn't even know what to do. He didn't know where to put himself. He was so terrified. Hamas at that point was sending 100 missiles a day. It was a Friday. He told his soldiers to put on all their protective gear. I don't know what that would do, but if there's shrapnel or something to protect them. He didn't explain why. He said every piece of protective gear put on, and he's waiting. He knows they have to fix it, but the minutes are ticking on. It becomes Shabbos. He's a religious Jew. He's a Chabad. And on Friday night, he had a replacement that he would run and pray the Friday night service. So it was Friday night, and his replacement came, and he's praying the service, and he's just praying to God. Like on one hand, he's praying, just any missiles are going to fall. At least let me be there with my men. I don't want them to be alone. He was praying very intently. He got back. 2 missiles had fallen. Hamas shot 2 missiles. 1 missile went to an area that was basically a deserted area. No people were there. No housing was there. No building was there. It's in an area called Sufka. And another missile did get to a developed area, a settlement called Nir Yitzhak, but it happened to hit a building that there were no people in. And that was it. At a certain point Friday night, the Iron Dome got fixed. He gets the message, the Iron Dome is fixed. 15 minutes later on his watch, Hamas shoots 50 missiles. He's like, oh my. Imagine if Hamas shot these 50 missiles 20 minutes before. If they shot them 20 minutes before, 50 missiles would have hit 50 targets. The entire time when the Iron Dome was down, which was several hours, Hamas shot 2 missiles. One that landed in empty land, one that landed in an empty building. 15 minutes later, they shot 50 missiles, and the Iron Dome was in place. He couldn't say this for a long time. It was classified information. He just recently shared this. It became declassified, and he was able to share it. But to me, it was such a sign of what I keep saying, We don't even know the miracles. We don't even realize they're happening all the time. Thursday, the eve of Hanukkah, soldiers in the north, they saw by their detective radars that 3 terrorists from Hezbollah had penetrated, and they neutralized them. That's, language, army, political double talk to mean they killed them. They neutralized them. And now they're coming to the bodies. And as they're walking towards them, towards the dead bodies, this animal, like a wild boar, runs by. And they see from the bush of those dead bodies, 3 people are shooting. They're like, oh my. We thought we neutralized them. We thought we killed them. It was a trap. It was a ploy. They were waiting for us to come to their bodies, and then they were going to shoot at us. But because that animal ran by and they got scared and they just saw movement, so they thought it was a person. They weren't paying, they were paying attention, but they were like, very tense, high alert. They shot at the animal. The soldiers identified and managed to kill all 3 of these terrorists that were lying in wait to kill them. Again, just the hand of God. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes we don't even know till after it's a miracle. Another thing, I just recently heard of a soldier who was in Gaza. As I said, in Gaza, you don't have your cell phone on you. And he got a break. Every once in a while, they let not all the soldiers, some of the soldiers get like a night off. Not off that they're going home, but off that they're away from Gaza. And if you've ever seen any videos, one of the exciting moments is they get their cell phones back. So he's on his cell phone that night, and I wouldn't have done this. I have never done this, but he went on Twitter because he knows that's where Hamas posts, and he was watching what they were posting. I have never watched anything they've posted. I do not recommend it, but he was. And what does he see in one of these Hamas videos? He sees a sniper that set his target on an Israeli soldier and shot. And as he's watching the video, because you could see with a sniper, it gets very close. He says, that soldier that the sniper shot at is me. He recognized himself. He's that soldier. That was the end of the video. They just show you the sniper, sees the soldier, and shoots. What they obviously didn't show was, somehow, the sniper missed. He's here to see the video of himself being shot, and he knows the sniper missed. This is what we say, our sages say, Ein Baal Hanes Makir Beniso. So often the recipient of a miracle doesn't even know what's happening, doesn't even know. And it's happening and happening and happening. Something else I want to highlight, something that moved me very much, is what we're seeing is people's self-sacrifice and love for each other. We've heard many stories of people October 7th that heard what happened and went to help. Most of the people that went to help had a certain relationship with the people they were helping. So I heard about a man, his name was Elimelech, and he heard what was going on, and he sent a message to his brother Menachem, I'm going down. I'm going south to help. Menachem said, I'm coming with. And the 2 of them drove down in their cars, not soldiers, not army men, not related to anyone, didn't know the land at all, nothing to do with this part of Israel, but they heard what was happening, and they weren't going to sit comfortably in Tel Aviv or wherever they were from. They drove down, they got to Kibbutz Be'eri, that was one of the hardest hit of the settlements, tremendous number of casualties, tremendous number of hostages. They found an abandoned army jeep. Who knows what happened to the soldiers that were from that army jeep? They took it, and for 14 hours, they kept going back into Kibbutz Be'eri. They did something very, so to speak, simple, not so simple. They went into the people's houses. They found their safe room. They knocked on the door. They convinced the people, we're not Arabs pretending, because the Arabs did this as well. They would pretend they were Jews coming, but you could pretty easily hear an Arab voice versus a Jewish voice. They said Shema Yisrael. They sang songs of Simchas Torah, holiday songs, to convince the people to come out, piled them in their jeep, drove them to a safe area, and then went back and got more, and then went back and got more, and then went back and got more. They rescued over 100 people. That means 100 people that probably would have died that they personally saved. They did this for 14 hours. At the end of the 14 hours, Elimelech went into a house to do what he's been doing for 14 hours, and there was a terrorist hiding there. And when he came in, he shot him and killed him. And I don't know, I was just so moved by this story because the incredible power of an individual, This man gave up his life to save people. They're Jews. I heard of people driving down and rescuing. To me, every single person that did that is incredible, is unbelievable. But most of the stories I heard were relatives. I heard of a grandfather who was army man and grandfather who went down and rescued his son and grandchildren. Of parents that went down and rescued their son and 5 friends. There were relatives that went down. There were army people that went down. The young man, many of you have heard his story, I'm sure, who in the end was only saved himself because he was wearing tzitzit, because could have been a terrorist in a ditch at that point, who saved so many people. But he was an army man. He wasn't in his uniform, and that's why he almost died himself, but he was army. Many army people from all over Israel ran down to help, including Arabs. There's Israeli Arabs that serve in the army. There's Israeli Arabs, a certain sect of Arabs called Jerusalem, that serve in the army. Many of them went down to help. Incredible. They actually were very helpful because since they're Arabs, they managed to trick terrorists. And they'd like call to one, come help me, whatever, in Arabic with a very thick Arabic accent. And then the terrorists would come and they would kill him. But they're army people. They're trained soldiers. They're trained in the army. I know of a farmer in that area who personally went again and again to the area of the festival. He made 10 trips to that area. He saved 150 people from the festival. 150 people that probably would have been slaughtered, he saved. But again, he knew the area. He used to have a farm exactly where the festival is. He lives not far from there. He was driving the people back to his farm, which somehow was protected. The Arabs didn't go there at all. But here was this man, not army, not going for relatives. He didn't have any connection to the land, didn't have any connection to the area, went to a kibbutz where he didn't know anyone there, and he saved people for 14 hours going in and out of the most dangerous settlement to save people he totally didn't know. But they're his family, they're his fellow Jews. And he did it for 14 hours until he was killed. I thought it's just such a testimony to what it means, to what each one of us knows, each one of us, the power of the individual, what each person can accomplish when he just got to step up to the plate. There's a need, and I've got to do it. Something else that, of course, we're seeing is God's love. I say the miracles show God's love. A lot of people experience things that really make them feel God's love and their desire to be closer to God. It's God's love and it's a desire to be closer. There's a soldier on October 7th who was sent down to the south. He and fellow soldiers were fighting, tremendously outnumbered, and he got shot very, very badly. He got shot in his back. It hit a major artery. He was severely wounded. He knew he had a tourniquet in his left pocket, but he couldn't even get to it. The injury was on the left side. So all he could do was lay on the ground, hope the terrorists would think he was dead and leave him alone. And there was like a monument in this kibbutz. And very quietly, as he's bleeding to death, he rolled his body towards this monument until he was under the monument, where he thought he'd have some protection from the terrorists. But he didn't have protection from his own body, and he was under the monument, and he lost conscious. As he's unconscious, he remembers this, he shares this, he feels he's enveloped in love. He felt such love. And this man, of course, as he's almost like a floating soul, he's thinking to himself, why am I getting this love? I'm so far from perfect. I'm so far from what God wants. I don't deserve this. Why am I so beloved? What have I done that I'm getting God's embrace like this? And as he's thinking these thoughts, he knows, again, he's unconscious. He's experiencing this. That's what we call an out-of-body experience. And he knew he was dying. He was gradually disconnecting from the world. He knew he was dying, which in a sense he was okay with at that point. It seemed probably more pleasant than being in his body. But then he thought about his family, and he's like, I can't die. I have to go back. And he sort of put this out there. I can't die. I have a family. I have to go back. And he just felt that he suddenly regained consciousness. He was on hard concrete under the monument, and he somehow had the strength to get out his tourniquet and stop his bleeding. He said he was so thirsty. He thought he was going to die from lack of thirst, but he just imagined he was drinking because there's anything else he could do about it. And gradually, other wounded soldiers did the same trick he did. More and more wounded soldiers that the terrorists thought they killed rolled under the monument. And they were just perfectly quiet there, praying that the terrorists shouldn't find them. A number of soldiers under this monument. And they were there for 8 hours. For 8 hours, he's lying on the concrete, so weak, not sure he's going to die because of the loss of blood, die from the thirst, but he kept telling himself he's not going to die because he was supposed to have died. He should have died. And God let him come back. So he said he knows he's not going to die. He's seems like he's going to die. He knows he's not going to die. After 8 hours, a helicopter landed. But they were all too weak to say anything. So the helicopter was there. They're under the monument, and they literally can't even call out to the helicopter. And he said he doesn't know how this happened, but God gave him energy, and his loss of blood, his back injury, almost gone from thirst, and he managed to get the 300 meters from where he was to the helicopter and saved himself and saved the other soldiers under there. He said every single soldier that was with him under that monument, they all survived. And as he's telling this, and he's still, he's still recovering. He's not done yet. But as he's telling this, his point is, until now, I believed in God, but, not enough. Not completely. Not enough to do anything about it. He said, but now I believe in God. Now I believe in God in a very, very different way. Now I believe in God that I'm going to live a very different life because of this. I mean, he's still hospitalized, but he knows he's recovering, and he knows he's going to live a very different life because of his relationship with God. Has anyone here had something, obviously not as dramatic and difficult and traumatic as that, but something that made you feel, until now I knew I believed in God, but now I really believe in God? There's levels and levels and levels of belief. There's a story with the first Rebbe of Chabad, we refer to as the Alter Rebbe, that he, at a certain point, went to study with the Maggid of Mezrich, with the Hasidic movement. And when he came back, his father-in-law was very, very angry with him because his father-in-law opposed the Hasidic movement. And he said, what did you go there for? What did you gain? And he said, now I know there's a God. His father-in-law said, what? That's what you went for? And he called some maid in the kitchen. He said, do you believe in God? And she's like, of course she does. He's like, so what did you go for? And the Alter Rebbe said, she says, but I know. There's levels and levels and levels of belief, deeper and deeper and deeper. And the deeper we go in our belief, the deeper it impacts us. Every Jew believes in God. If you're Jewish, if your mother was Jewish, if you converted according to Jewish law, you naturally believe in God. Every Jew is a believer. But as the belief gets deeper and deeper, it compels us to act in a way that expresses that belief. So anyone here have such an experience that they went through something that made them feel like, oh, now I really believe. I believed until now, but now my belief is on a whole different level. Maybe nobody can think of anything that happened that gave them that dramatic shift, but I think there's also the gradual deepening of the relationship. That sort of gradual sense that maybe you can't see what was a demarcation line, but if you look at yourself and then you think back to your relationship to God a half a year ago, your relationship to God a year ago, or your relationship to God 5 years ago, and you're like, oh, wow. Like, I would have said then I believed, but it's not like the relationship, the belief I have now. I've definitely had that experience with myself. I could definitely look back and think, oh, I thought then I was such a believer, but definitely over the years, things shift and deepen and deepen and deepen. Anyone else had that experience besides myself? We're just over time and serving and seeing God in your life. It just becomes deeper and deeper God's reality and deeper that need to serve him.
I think for me, I train myself to notice miracles in my life, and that's a relationship, right? Because I see the miracle, which means Hashem gives me His love, He's communicating with me, and when I see each miracle, it just reaffirms God and God's existence, and so that's how I think that's how I get closer and more living on a deeper level.
I think that's a great technique. I think for all of us, not just because we're coming from Hanukkah, but in general, I think for all of us, as we see, celebrate, note, and share the miracles, it definitely deepens and deepens our feelings. Anyone else? Manya, were you going to share something?
Oi. Hold on. No. You know what I see in my life, how things are lined up, how everything comes at a certain time, which is perfect time for everything. It makes me feel, of course, it cannot be just coincidence. It's planned that way. And so,
Yes. Yes, that is definitely a strong way of seeing the patterns, seeing the timing. Absolutely. I know exactly what you mean. And it's like that could not possibly be random. It's too perfectly orchestrated.
Exactly. It's like perfect. And it gives me hope that even with a difficult situation, when you're waiting for an answer and you don't get it now, and I mean myself, I don't get it now, it gives me hope that it's not time yet.
With you. I very often think that God, it's all timing. Timing is so precise. God's timing is so precise and it's so perfect. We would be a little more relaxed. It's okay, God. Your timing doesn't have to be so perfect. Just do it now. And God's like, no. I want maximum profit. I want the maximum perfect moment. And yes, that's a very beautiful and very positive way of saying if we don't see it yet, it's just timing. It's just timing.
I hope so.
I definitely want to absorb that line, and I think you're right. No, yes, you are right. Everything good. Where every one of us is God's only child. For your child, you wouldn't do anything. God doesn't want to give us everything. So why don't we see it all? It's timing. Yeah. It's timing. Yes. Hold that in your heart. I think you're absolutely right. It's timing.
Thank you.